Hey there YouTube, Doc's Motorcycle Service. Rawr, 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 rawr. Welcome back to the shop. YouTube, it's so good to be back in front of you. We've got a little update video that either came out just in front of this one or it's going to come out right behind this one, just depending on how everything flows. We're going to go into our absence, what we got done, and bring you up to speed on the shop. But until then, let me tell you what we're doing today. So, I say this all the time, and you're probably used to it by now, but this video is probably going to go a little long. It's probably going to be in two parts, 1, 2, dose. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but here's what we got on the lift today. So, we got a 2012 Honda Shadow Aero Phantom. Dun dun dun. At least that's what I think it's called. I don't know. I'm not a Honda guy. But let me give you a little backstory and I'll show you some pictures of this bike as we go along the way. So I got a friend, an acquaintance, a buddy, and we're going to go down some rabbit holes here, okay? But my friend was excited to get a bike, and you know how you were, we all were, when you finally made that decision that you wanted a motorcycle and you found one that you could afford and you took off and you went and got it, and you probably didn't know as much about motorcycles as you should, and somebody probably said, hey, before you go put money on a motorcycle, call me, call one of us guys, let us go with you. Well, that didn't quite happen. And it was a good looking motorcycle. It had been bobbed. And by the time he got it home, he only had one light on it and had popped fuses and a whole bunch of stuff. So he came to me and said, hey, would you take a look at this thing for me? And I said, sure, let's delve into it. And got it down here, and let's go ahead and take a look at that video now. I've always found that it's good to get a bike at eye level. If you've not seen my video on the Harbor Freight lift, I'll put a link to it here. I've been using this lift for, what, 3 years at this house, probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 years at the other house. But the video will have the link in it. But anyway, I always like to start with a full visual of the bike at eye level with good lighting, and just kind of take in everything as you go down one side of it, looking at it, visualizing it, checking it for anything that might also have been damaged by the problem that you're currently looking at. Now again, this is an electrical issue, and you're going to see more of what we're talking about here in a minute. But you know, like I said, it's always good to take a look at it at eye level. The owner of the bike said he was having difficulty gaining access to the battery, and we'll come back and take a look at that here in a little bit and what areas we might need to get in for that. We can see here where apparently this original setup for this bike had a bar that went here for the fender, and we can see here one of my concerns about the curvature of this fender. See how narrow it is here and how the fender widens out there. I don't know if that's normal or not, and we're going to delve into that, because remember, when you buy a bike used, you don't know who did the work on the bike, whether it was the first time that they had ever done any work on the bike, and whether or not it was done correctly. Alright, so as you see here, this seems to be the major malfunction. It looks like we have a wiring harness. Can't quite tell. Looks like a wiring harness coming out of here with several wires on it. And as you can see, what we got here, God, it's hard to tell. This mess is so melted up. Looks like we got, God, this is a mess. We have at least 3 plug-ins and some tape. And it looks like that wiring harness came from back in here. And I'm guessing that the person who did the kit ran the wire right down the middle of the fender and came into the back of the light here. You know, we can see other problems here. These gouges here. These gouges should not be here on the tire. So, all right. Looking down this side, I asked him if he had adjusted the shock on it to take out, to make the shock as long as possible. Looks like there's several different settings here that he has played with, and not quite fully extended, but just as I was riding the bike around, I did notice that the suspension was pretty squishy on it. Interesting down here, this is the first time I've worked on a Honda, so a lot of this is first time for me as well, and we're kind of looking as we're going up in here, seeing what else. Oh yeah, that's right. If I didn't already mention it, he mentioned that there was a tuner in here somewhere, and that tuner is not plugged in to the battery. It's not attached to the bike, so it makes us wonder why. Anytime there's something on a bike and it's not plugged in, really makes me wonder why. So looking it over down through here, he mentioned that these turn signals were not working on the bike as a result of the wiring in the back. Well, we got the side cover off. It just snaps off, goes in. Show you what it looks like on the inside. It's got 3 mounting points here, there, and there, and they go in here, here, and here. It just pops off. You have your fuse cover here, and I went ahead and took this one out, and you can see that right there in the middle, that one's burned up, and that one is for the horn, turn, and stop light. We'll check the rest of them as we go, make sure they're good. We can see the battery box right there. Still working on gaining access to that. And it looks like it's going to have to come out of this plate here somehow, but I'm not real sure how that's going to happen at this point. So we're going to step around here and look at the other side of the inspection cover. Take that off. So it's got a toolbox on it. I wonder if there's anything in there. Alright. So nothing there. So I'm guessing this seat's going to have to come off. And it needs to slide out from here. And it's hooked back here somewhere. Maybe there's just a lip on it. Alright, YouTube, let me get this seat off and we'll see what we can find. Alright, we got the bolts out of the seat. We're taking it off. Forgive me if I'm doing this one-handed. Big camera's not working right now. We've been down so long that all the batteries have died and will not recharge. So we've got some batteries on the way. So here we are. Looks like this has a plate that slides up under here, and it comes apart because there's a factory zip tie right here for a cable on it. I'm just curious as to what has to come off next. I have a theory that looking at it through this hex head bolt down here, right there, and this nut is going to allow this piece to separate from that piece, and then maybe just slide up and come on out. So let me work on that. Stick around, YouTube. So we really didn't have to take off these mounts that set in here for the rear seat. All we really had to do was take out the bolts on each side that allowed this bracket to come off and allow this piece here to slide out. And it just slides right out like so. So now we're on the inside. I may have to drop this thing down a little bit so I can see in there and better understand what's going on. So here's our bad wires. They're held right here by a zip tie. They're wrapped up in this mess, and I've got more wires going to the front, so I'm going to have to dig into what's going on in here and see how this was spliced. And I'm guessing this is the tuner. Well, I don't know. I guess that's the hookup for the tuner. YouTube, I'm gonna have to video, or I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to Google this tuner here and see what's up with it. So before we go any further, let me do that and we'll be right back. Okay, so we got the bike lowered down to a better position where I can see in here. Here is the wad of cables that were zip tied together, and as you can see, Lord Jesus, sometimes people just shouldn't be working on motorcycles. I mean, I get it. All right, so you can call this a tech tip if you want to, but you know, there's better ways to end or conclude wires that you don't need. Wrapping them up in black duct tape is not one of them. That's not how we work here. So I'm guessing, without looking at a wiring diagram for this bike, that this was probably the left and right turn signal that had been removed from this. And we've done a little research on this F2000 tuner that is supposedly a fuel management tuner. The internet says that if you replace the exhaust and or the air cleaner, or both, you should put a tuner on these Honda Shadows Phantom. And we've confirmed it's a 2012, not 2011. So at this point, oh, one more thing that we've discovered is, you remember I talked about this curvature? You see how the line of the fender seems to get tighter against the line of the tire? Well, what that's about is, there's a bracket right here, this bracket that goes up, that the fender attaches to up here, and it wraps around the swing arm, and it's held together with that one bolt, that one nut on that bolt that comes in from the bottom there. And you can, prior to tightening it, you can slide this bracket forward and backward to better adjust the clearance of the fender. So I'm now really concerned about the head on this bolt, which you see right there, which travels right down the middle of the fender to this area here. I'm telling you, YouTube, I tell you, man, God, you go to buy a used bike, man, you need to look at a bike. I mean, when you're buying another person's bike, a lot of times you're buying another person's junk. I'm just gonna say it. Y'all can give me hell about it if you want to, but I mean, obviously there's something hitting this tire in 3 different places. Right there, and right there. I mean, God, YouTube, man, and this goes for your own bike too, man. You gotta pay attention to your bike. You gotta know what you're buying. You gotta know what's happening. You gotta look at it. You make a modification to your bike, you need to take it down the road
and then come back and I've talked about this before, listening to your motorcycling, yeah, going down the road with your speakers blaring and your cool shades on and all that stuff. Yeah, that's cool. That makes you look cool. But at the same time, you're trusting your life to whoever works on your motorcycle, whether that's you or somebody else. And you should be riding your bike enough that if the air is slack in one of the tires, you feel it. If something's not right, you feel it. I find it hard to believe with the grooves that are cut in this tire that you couldn't feel that. But the guy bought it, brought it home, and discovered the lights weren't working. So he really had no time on that bike. So we've cut away the nastiness that was what's left of the wiring harness. And we've got that removed down now to good wire. And again, I'm going to tell you, you know how I am. I like to do things right. I really need some green wire with a yellow stripe to make the wiring harness match going into the tail light. So the tail light, if you can see it under there, it has a tag light on the bottom. It undoubtedly has looks like an LED for your running light and your brake light. So I don't know if these three wires are tag light, running light, and brake light, or if they are tail light, running light, and ground, and that the clear light for the tag is part of your running light and stays on all the time. And I really want to try to keep the wires matching, but at the same time we have these plug-ins that were burn off of the end, so I don't know what this looks like going down into the fender. And my friend actually wants to try to move the light over to this bracket and the tag over this bracket. So I'm having to think about what we're going to do in refabricating this, because it looks like if I take these two bolts out, the light assembly will separate from the tag bracket. So we might be able to heat those and manipulate them to where this can be mounted to the bracket here, and the tag bracket can be cut down and reshaped and mount to the fender bracket here. So at this point we're going to pause and run to the parts store and see if we can get some green with yellow stripe, because I've got a brown and I've got a green, and I'm going to take this off and see what kind of connections are in there. Alright, so we took this nut off this bolt here, and it appears the bolt is made into the fender, so we didn't have to lose that. And we took out the two Phillips head bolts here on the brackets, and it looks like the threads that the bolt went into are attached to the fender. So all we're really going to do now is see if I can do this one-handed. We're just going to rotate this over and pull it out. This is what we got. We have, looks like a light brown, a yellow, and a green. And these look like they're in pretty good shape, but have you noticed anything? Other than that, well, that doesn't look good at all. So if I was a betting man, I would say here is where the problem originated from. All right, so tell me, what do you see? All right, here's what I see. I see rubber right here, and right there, and right there. And that's interesting, along with the shiny spots. Let me see if I can do this. I can't really do it. There's some shiny spots right here and here, here and here and here. And if you can see, that bolt head is as shiny as a new penny. Look at that. So this tells me, and there's your wires. This tells me that that fender was too close to the tire. So let's go back over and look at that swing arm bracket. But before we do that, you can see the wiring harness coming out here. And this is interesting, man. God, I'll tell you, I really feel like somewhere in this kit there should have been something that either ran these wires over to the edge, away from the tire, or some type of bracket that should have held them in place in the middle of the fender. But pardon the pun, but Bob's your uncle. There's our problem. There is our problem right there. And there you go. I'm looking at this side. If I can do this, you can see there's a Phillip here, and there's a missing one here. So it looks like this one rubbed the rubber off until it took the nut off, and then the bolt came out of there. And these right here are the three problems hitting the tire. Now this is the fender bracket I was telling you about. There's a little bit of play for it to move forward. Either that, or it's going to have to be bent forward to get it off of this tire. But now you can probably see these grooves a lot better. Here, here, and here. That was a direct result of this fender being too close to the tire. Alright, I don't know if you can see it or not, but if you look right in here on this bracket, and this bracket comes down right here, right up here's where the fender mounted at, and it comes down to here, and it goes around the swing arm. If you look right here, this bolt right there on the left, there's maybe 1/8 of an inch that bracket could have been moved forward and retightened, and nothing else. The bracket could have been bent forward like that, maybe heated a little bit and bent to bring that fender up off to give it more clearance on the tire. The interesting thing is this bracket is mounted on the swing arm, so it shouldn't have been bottoming out if it had been put in properly. Okay, so now we know what we need. We need to find the original wiring diagram that tells us, or no, we need to find the bobber kit wiring diagram that tells us, because remember, on the wiring harness over there, we have green, solid green, green with a yellow stripe, and brown. That's coming from the OEM wiring harness, going into a light brown with a white stripe, and a yellow, solid yellow, and a solid green. So we need to find out how those wires transition to these, and we need to figure out how we're going to route these. And we need. So just a little side note here, how to test things if you can't find a wiring diagram, and I've yet to find a wiring diagram online for this bike that's in color, but just kind of give you an idea of what you can do if you don't have one. So as you can see, we have our light here, and we have our tag light, and we have our yellow and our brown and our green. Well, you got to be careful doing this, but sometimes you can play with stuff until you figure out what you've got. I have determined that the green wire on this spare battery here is ground. And what we have is we then take another wire and we put it on the positive side. Now you'll see what happened there. So you've got a red lens lit up and you've got the tag light. Well, your tag light is going to be on all the time with your running light. And if we come in with the yellow wire and touch it, we just have a red lens. Now I have taken the brown wire and I've hooked it to the positive side while leaving the ground wire over here. Now watch how it gets brighter as I touch the brake light to the positive terminal. See how it gets brighter? So now we know that green is ground, brown is our running light, and yellow is our brake light. So now all we got to do is take an ohms meter and go back over to the other 3 wires coming off the bike after we replace the fuses, and we can basically do the same thing. Let's go take a look. Now it's always a good idea not only to check the fuse that you think is blown, but check the other fuses as well. Looking at this, the one that was blown that we knew for sure was the 10 amp turn, horn, and stop, which is right here. But by checking the rest of them, I discovered that the meter fuse was blown as well. There was a spare 20 here and a spare 10 missing here, so I went ahead and replaced the spare 10 as well. So what we're going to do now is strip some of these wires off back here. I think I've got a good idea of how these match up with the light. Okay, so we got these 3 wires that were burned up. We've got them nipped, clean, and separated. These wires up here we assume are okay because we're going to clean this up before we're done. And but yeah, we're assuming they're okay. So we got our fuses replaced. So the next step is to come over here, fire up the ignition, at least to the on position, and watch for sparks. So I'm looking over here where I can see this wiring harness, make sure there's no other bad places in it. Got the fuse box open so I can listen for a popped fuse. We've got this ground from this tuner that we don't think is the right tuner. We've got it laying there, so here we go. Well, we got a headlight and we got a clicker, which I think is probably a turn signal relay, and we've got a blinking light up here, which means there's a signal on somewhere. I guess these are manual turn signals, and you turn them left, you got the left one blinking, and it stays that way until you bump it back to center. Bump to the right, right one's going, bump it back to the center, it goes off, and then we'll hit our power on. Sounds like the fuel pump is doing its thing. All right, so we're going to turn this back. We're not going to start it. We know we're in good shape. Now let's get some alligator clips. Let's strip this wire back, get an ohms meter on it, and see what's happening with the running light, the ground, and the brake light. Stick around, YouTube.
Okay, so that's where we're going to stop the video today, and we're going to move into part 2 here in about a week or so to bring you up to speed on what's happening and where we're going to go next at. So YouTube, as always, I appreciate you coming by the shop. Ride safe, handle your business, save some money, and cut!